Hello there, art fans. Today we're going to talk paper and go over a few different types of paper, what they're for, what you can use if you're looking to start out doing some drawing, some cartooning, some painting, and help you out a bit. So first of all, there's a basic drawing paper, which usually can be found in books like this or this, and usually you can also find it in pads like these down here, but you can find it, and usually it says something like, sketch paper or a general purpose sketch paper. And paper is often measured in pounds, how heavy it is. So that you can see here, this is a 50-pound paper. This is 60-pound paper, so it's a little bit heavier. And this is good for general purpose. I just do some ink drawings on it. You can see it buckles under the weight of this much ink sometimes. Oh, there's one. That one's buckling a little more. But it's, I generally only use this for quick stuff in drawing books. Nothing finished is ever done on this paper. But just sort of, intermediate or beginning drawings that sometimes I like to work in a book rather than on sheets of paper. And you can actually get fancy sketchbooks, like this one has fancy watercolor paper in it. So you can actually get books like this with better paper, but I figured I'd just show you the basic ones first. So that's your basic drawing paper, 50, 60 pounds. Good stuff for starting out with, good stuff for doing preliminary things, good stuff for if you're out traveling, you want a little book with you. But otherwise, I don't work on it that much. Mostly what I work on is Bristol. Here is a large 14 by 17 pad of Bristol. And this, I cut this, when I'm doing like cartooning or comic book work, I cut this down to 11 by 17, so I just cut. Then I end up making art cards out of the leftover pieces, because you can, once you cut off, an edge right there, you can then cut it up into different, and get a bunch of these little cards out of it, which I use all the time. But there's also a few different types of Bristol. You can see this here is also 100 pounds. And Bristol is also measured in plies. So this is 2-ply Bristol. And it's the Strathmore 300 series, which means it's pretty good Bristol. Not the best. They got 300 series, 400 series, 500 series Bristol. You can find this stuff in your general, arts and crafts stores like a Michaels or an AC Moore or something like that. And I use this most of the time. And there's also two types of surfaces on it. There is smooth surface, and see right there, there's vellum surface and smooth surface. Smooth means smooth. Vellum means it's got a little tooth to it. And that makes a difference when you're drawing or using ink on it, because if paper's got a little tooth to it, that's usually good for pencil, because the tooth, the little roughness of the surface draws the graphite from the pencil off easily. So it's and you can get interesting different effects with it on the vellum surface. But if you're going to be inking on it, most people like smooth surface, because that way, if you're using a pen or a brush, it doesn't get caught in the roughness of the surface. It doesn't catch on the fibers of the paper. And like I said, the only two difference between these two is, I think, how many times they run it through the press when they make it. If they press it down harder, it gets smoother. But these are what I usually use. But like I said, this is kind of the bottom of the line of Bristol, which is fine with me most of the time, especially since I don't do a lot of erasing. I often will print out my pencils in a blue line and ink right over, like you see here. You can see in her mouth there, it's slightly light blue. And over there too. So instead of inking over a pencil line, I'll print this out in my printer in a very light blue line. You can see that down, and ink over that, because I find that easier than inking over pencil. So it's okay for me to use the sort of lower end 300 series, because I'm not doing a lot of erasing on it. Because the better the paper, the more sort of roughing up it can take. Like this is Strathmore 400 series smooth Bristol, and it's got a nice texture to it, and the fibers are kind of tighter on it, so that you can erase over it more, so that when you're you put a pencil on it, you need to erase it, you can erase more on it, you can erase hard on it, and the paper will still be good. That is it'll hold up better than this were to erasing and such things. I know most comic book artists prefer a 400 Bristol, just like I said, just because it takes more damage to you can use it. It's a hardier paper. Being that my pencils and inks are on separate pages, I don't need to do that so much. I'm not roughing up my paper as much as if I was inking right over the pencils and having to redraw stuff. So I do that all on separate sheets of paper, so I can get away with the yellow. And then after that comes watercolor paper, and you can tell where's some fancy watercolored paper often comes with these deckled edges. That's and this is once again, watercolor paper comes in many different weights. This is a 140-pound watercolor paper, which is about the lightest I like to go, because otherwise it'll buckle under the weight of the water. Let me show you a little. This is a 140 pound, I believe, but it's a small piece, and you can see if you put enough water on it, it starts to buckle. You can counteract that by wetting the back of the paper too, but I haven't done that on this one. Like I said, I got that as part of this ready cut 140-pound watercolor stuff, that 5x7 one, but this is which doesn't have, it's ready cut, it doesn't have deckled edges, but the larger sheets have deckled edges. And these were all done on that 140-pound watercolor. So if you're going to do these are gouache on paper. And gouache is a fairly dry watercolor, so it doesn't buckle too much. It doesn't buckle too much. Oh, look, I had an old painting on the back that I reused the paper. But then there's the big guy, which is 300-pound watercolor paper. Now that's a stiff watercolor paper. This can hold up to a lot of different techniques and scumbling, and I really like this 300-pound watercolor paper, but it's expensive. One sheet, this is sold by the sheet. Usually the sheets are like 20 by 30, and one 20 by 30 sheet of this can be $15. So this is the nice. If you could feel this paper, it feels so nice. It's got a good feel to it. It takes water really well, and it's just my favorite. But like I said, it's expensive. I don't use it a ton because I don't have to. You don't need that for every occasion. And then there's other odd paper, like I found. I've been using for a while. Once again, it's a 5x7 Shinzen watercolor paper. Except when I first got it, just to try it out. It is so rough that, it was impossible to draw on. I was like, my goodness, this is nuts. It wasn't until I kind of developed this technique with ink and a rough old broken brush, sort of scraping against it, that I was able to do anything with this paper. So sometimes the paper dictates what you can do on it. And that's what this super, super rough watercolor paper did to me. It eventually dictated what I was able to do on it. But there you go. Let's sum it up. There are your papers for you. You got your basic sketch paper. You got your lower end Bristol, smooth and vellum. Vellum means rough. You got your higher end Bristol. You got your watercolor papers, 140 pound, all the way up to 300 pound. There's also like a 90 pound watercolor paper, but I don't use that a whole lot. There you go. There's just a look at some of the papers you could use to make your stuff.